He's really fixing it. Listen to that engine.
That's my boy.
Get your hands off that car. Grant Whitaker's voice cracked across the service bay like a whip. Eli Carter froze beside the red Ferrari, one hand still hovering near the open engine compartment. He was 13, thin-shouldered, wearing a faded gray hoodie and sneakers with the soles starting to peel. He looked like a boy who should have been waiting in the lobby with a vending machine's soda, not standing 3 feet from a car worth more than most homes on the California coast. Grant crossed the floor fast. His polished shoes slapped against the concrete. "You hear me, boy?" Eli turned, but not quick enough. Grant grabbed him by the collar and shoved him back. Not hard enough to knock him down. Just hard enough to make every man in the room understand who had power here. Eli's mother, Marianne Carter, dropped the trash liner she was tying. "Mr. Whitaker, please," she said, rushing forward. He wasn't touching anything. He was just looking. Grant did not look at her. He looked at Eli like he had found grease on a white shirt. "This is not a playground," he said, "and I do not pay you to bring your kid around cars he could never afford to sit in." The bay went quiet, almost quiet. Somewhere near the tool wall, a technician coughed to hide a laugh. Another one looked down at his tablet. Owen Mitchell, the lead mechanic, stood with his arms folded and his mouth tight, pretending the whole thing was none of his business. Marianne reached for her son's shoulder. Her fingers trembled. "Eli," she whispered, "come here." But Eli did not move right away. His eyes stayed on the Ferrari. A 1962 Ferrari 250 GTO sat on the hydraulic lift under cold white service lights. Its red paint looked almost wet. Chrome caught every reflection. The hood was open like a chest cut open in surgery, and the engine was still ticking. Soft, uneven, alive. Eli heard it. Nobody else did. Grant saw the boy staring, and his face hardened. "Oh, you think you understand this machine?" he said. His voice rose, just enough for the whole room. "You think because you con you some videos on your mother's phone, you belong in my shop?" Eli's jaw tightened. Marianne stepped in front of him. "Please," she said. "He is a good boy. I will keep him out of the way." Grant picked up a push broom leaning against a tool cabinet and threw it at Eli's feet. The wooden handle bounced once. "Then make him useful," Grant said. "Sweep." No one moved. Not the technicians. Not the service manager behind the glass office. Not the billionaire, standing beside the lift with his hands in his coat pockets. Arthur Langford watched from 10 feet away, his silver hair neat, his face tired in a way money could not hide. He had seen cruelty before, in boardrooms, in negotiations, in quiet clubs where men smiled while destroying lives. But this was different. This was smaller, meaner, a grown man making himself big by making a child small. Arthur opened his mouth, then stopped, because Eli bent down and picked up the broom. Not with fear, not with defeat, with control. The kind of control that made Arthur look closer. Eli lowered his head and began sweeping the same clean patch of floor. Slow strokes. Back and forth. Back and forth. His mother stood beside him, breathing shallowly, her eyes wet but refusing to spill. Grant turned away with a satisfied smile. Now he said to his staff, clapping once, "Can we please return to the real work?" The technicians gathered around the Ferrari again. Laptops opened. Diagnostic cables hung from the engine bay. Someone restarted the motor. The V12 caught, then settled into a restless idle. A beautiful sound. A wounded sound. Eli swept. The broom scratched it against concrete. The engine fluttered once, barely a heartbeat. Eli's hand stopped, his eyes lifted. Across the bay, Arthur Langford noticed. So did no one else. Grant was busy telling Arthur the usual story. Old fool system, aging ignition, rare parts, difficult tolerances. More time, more money. Arthur's face went flat. For 18 months, men with framed degrees and perfect invoices had said the same thing. More time, more money. Still, the car kept dying. Eli listened again. There it was. A faint stumble under the idle. Not electrical, not timing. Something thinner, something starving. His breath slowed. In his mind, he was no longer in Titan Prestige Motors. He was in a narrow garage in Oakland, standing beside Frank Bellini, watching the old man tap a fuel line with 2 fingers. Rubber lies from the outside, Frank had told him. Heat tells the truth. Eli looked at the Ferrari's fuel routing, then at the exhaust manifold, then at the bend in the old line sitting too close to heat. His fingers tightened around the broom. He knew. Grant laughed at something Owen said. Arthur stared at the car like a man, watching the last photograph of his family burn. And Eli Carter, the boy they had just humiliated in front of a room full of men, stood there with the answer in his hands. He was not rich. He was not certified. He did not own the building. But he knew what none of them knew. That engine was asking for help. And he was the only one in the room humble enough to hear it. Arthur Langford did not become a billionaire by trusting noise. He trusted patterns. He trusted pauses. He trusted the tiny changes in a person's face when the truth got too close. And right now, he was not watching Grant Whitaker. He was watching Eli Carter. The boy had gone still with the broom in his hands. His shoulders were low. His chin was tucked. To most people, he looked obedient, beaten down, exactly where Grant wanted him. But Arthur saw something else. The boy was listening, not pretending to listen, not staring with childish curiosity. Listening the way a surgeon listens to a heartbeat. Listening like the room had gone quiet around him, and only the engine mattered. Arthur turned back to the Ferrari. The red hood trembled slightly over the running motor. The old V12 breathed through polished carburetors, elegant and angry like it remembered better days. The sound filled the bay, deep, metallic, expensive. Then it stumbled, once. A whisper inside a roar. Arthur felt it in his chest. His hand closed around the edge of his coat. For a moment, he was 20 again, sitting beside his father on a 2-lane road outside Monterey. His father's hand rested loose on the steering wheel. The Pacific wind pushed through the open window. The engine sang clean and bright. His father smiled without looking over and said, "Listen to her, Teddy. She will tell you before she breaks." That was before the heart attack, before the funeral, before silence moved into the house and never really left. Grant's voice cut through the memory. "As I was saying, Mr. Langford, we believe there may be a cumulative issue with several aging systems. Fuel delivery, ignition harmonics, perhaps compression variants under heat." Arthur looked at him. Grant stood with a tablet in one hand and a calm corporate smile on his face. The same smile Arthur's had seen in men who could spend another man's money and sleep perfectly well that night. "Perhaps," Arthur said. Grant brightened, hearing agreement where there was none. "We can begin a new diagnostic phase immediately. Full teardown, controlled heat cycle testing, custom fabrication if required. It will not be inexpensive, but with a vehicle of this importance, stop." The word was soft. The room heard it anyway. The engine kept running. Grant blinked. "Sir?" Arthur's eyes did not move from the car. "I have heard that speech in San Francisco, in Connecticut, in London, in Munich. I heard a version of it in Maranello, from men who at least had the courtesy to look ashamed when they were guessing." Owen Mitchell shifted his weight near the workbench. Grant's jaw tightened. With respect, Grant said, "This vehicle is over 60 years old. Even under ideal stewardship, mechanical systems reach a point where perfection is no longer realistic." Arthur turned slowly. "Perfection?" His voice had no anger in it. That made it worse. "I am not asking for perfection, Mr. Whitaker. I am asking why I spent $2.3 million, and nobody can tell me why my father's car is choking." Marianne looked down. She knew that kind of pain. Not the money. Never the money. But the helplessness. The feeling of watching something precious slip away, while people with clean hands told you nothing could be done. Grant lowered his tablet. "This car has emotional value to you. I understand that." Arthur's face changed, just a little. But the temperature in the room dropped. "No," he said. "You do not." Grant went silent. Arthur stepped closer to the Ferrari. The service lights caught the lines in his face. He looked older now, not weak. Just tired from carrying names no one else could hear. "My father bought this car in Italy," he said. "He drove it himself, taught me to shift by feel, told me never to force a machine that was asking a question." His fingers brushed the fender, careful as touching a sleeping animal. "Years later, I taught my son in this car. Caleb stalled it 6 times in one afternoon and laughed every time. He said the engine sounded alive." Arthur swallowed. No one moved. Caleb died at 24. A drunk driver crossed the center line outside Santa Barbara. My father is gone. My son is gone. This car is the last place where both of them still feel close. The engine fluttered again. Eli heard it. So did Arthur. Grant looked at the floor. For the first time, he had no polished phrase ready. Then he found one. I am sorry for your loss. Truly. But sentiment cannot change mechanical reality. Eli's broom scraped once across the concrete. Too loud. Grant turned his head sharply. What are you looking at? Eli lowered his eyes. Nothing, sir. But his breathing had changed. Mary Ann felt it. A mother always did. She put one hand lightly against his back. Don't, that touch said. Please don't. Eli stayed still. Arthur saw the mother's hand. He saw the warning in it. He saw a whole life inside that small gesture. Stay quiet. Stay safe. Survive the room. And something inside him bent. Maybe it was the car. Maybe it was the boy. Maybe it was the memory of his father saying machines tell the truth before men do. Arthur looked at Eli. You heard it, didn't you? The room froze. Grant's head snapped toward Arthur. Mr. Langford, I really do not think. Arthur raised one hand. Not high, just enough. Grant stopped. Eli looked up slowly. His eyes were dark, steady, and far too certain for a child holding a broom. Arthur repeated the question. You heard something. Eli's throat moved. Mary Ann's fingers tightened on his shoulder. Owen stared at the floor. Grant stared at the boy like he wanted to erase him. The Ferrari idled between them all, wounded and waiting. Eli took one breath, then another. Yes, sir, he said. I did. Grant Whitaker laughed once. It was short, dry, the kind of laugh a man uses when he is trying to make the whole room laugh with him. No one did. Eli stood beside his mother with the broom in both hands. His fingers were wrapped tight around the wood, not shaking, just tight. Grant took a slow step toward him. You heard something, he said. That is your diagnosis? Eli did not answer right away. The engine idled behind them. The sound rolled against the concrete walls, low, uneven, restless. Arthur watched the boy's face. Mary Ann watched Grant's hands. Owen Mitchell watched the floor, because looking anywhere else would have forced him to choose what kind of man he was. Grant smiled wider. Go ahead, Eli, since Mr. Langford is interested. Tell us what your trained ear discovered while you were sweeping. A few technicians shifted. One man near the lift gave a nervous grin, then let it fade when Arthur looked his way. Eli swallowed. It is not constant, he said. His voice was quiet, but clear. Grant leaned closer, cupping a hand around one ear. Speak up. We cannot hear genius from back there. Mary Ann stepped forward. That is enough. Grant turned on her so fast she flinched. No, Mary Ann. It became enough when your son decided to involve himself in a client consultation. Arthur's voice cut in. I asked him. Grant froze. Arthur's eyes stayed on him, flat, controlled. You will not punish his mother for answering my question. That landed hard, not loud, hard. Grant's lips pressed together. For the first time that morning, Mary Ann looked at Arthur not as a rich man, but as a human being. Her eyes softened for half a second. Then worry came back. Eli looked at the Ferrari. The stumble happens after the engine warms, he said. Not right away. It sounds like fuel starvation, but only for a moment. Owen lifted his head. Grant noticed and shot him a warning glance. Eli continued. It is too small for the digital scan to catch cleanly. The system averages it out. But the engine does not average it out. The room changed again. That sentence did something. Even Grant felt it. Arthur stepped closer. What would cause that? Eli's eyes moved along the engine bay. Slowly, carefully. Like he was tracing a map only he could see. Maybe a soft restriction in the fuel line, he said. Something that changes with heat. Not fully blocked. Just enough to lower pressure for a few seconds. Grant clapped his hands once. There we have it. A maybe. He turned to Arthur. Mr. Langford, with respect, this is exactly why unqualified people should not be allowed near serious mechanical work. He is guessing. Eli looked at him then, not with anger, with something worse for Grant. Calm. I am not guessing, sir. The words were small, they hit big. Grant's face darkened. You are 13. Yes, sir. You have no certification. No, sir. You have never worked on a Ferrari 250 GTO. No, sir. Grant stepped closer until he towered over him. Then you are guessing. Eli's voice did not rise. No, sir. I am listening. Silence. The service bay seemed to hold its breath. Arthur felt those words in a place older than money, older than grief. His father had said almost the same thing 60 years ago with one hand on the wheel and the Pacific light on his face. Grant turned away sharply. This is absurd. But he was moving too fast now. His control had a crack in it. Mr. Langford, I apologize for this embarrassment. I will have the boy and his mother removed from the work area immediately. Marianne's face went pale. Removed? She whispered. Grant looked at her. Yes, and we will discuss your employment after the client leaves. Eli's head snapped toward his mother. That did it. Not the insult. Not the broom, not the laughter. His mother. Eli set the broom down, carefully. The wood touched the floor with a soft click. Please do not fire my mom, he said. She did nothing wrong. Grant smiled, cold now. Then you should have thought of that before opening your mouth. Arthur took one step forward. Mr. Whitaker. Grant turned, irritated. Sir, I am trying to protect the integrity of this facility. No, Arthur said. You are protecting yourself. Every eye in the bay moved to him. Arthur did not raise his voice. He did not need to. For 18 months, this facility and others like it have billed me for confidence. Not results. Confidence. And the first person in this room to say something specific is a child you handed a broom. Grant's cheek twitched. Arthur looked at Eli. If you had the chance, what would you do first? Eli breathed in. I would put an analog pressure gauge on the fuel line, he said. Run it until fully warm. Watch the needle, not the screen. Owen could not stop self. That could work, he murmured. Grant spun around. What did you say? Owen's ears turned red. I said it could show a transient drop, if there is one. Grant stared at him like betrayal had a face. Then he turned back to Arthur. Fine. The word came out sharp. If Mr. Langford wants to entertain this, we will do it properly. Not here. Not today. We will arrange an observed diagnostic session. Ferrari North America. A certification representative. Independent witnesses. Marianne's hand flew to her mouth. Grant looked at Eli. 1 week from today, 90 minutes. You diagnose it in front of professionals. He leaned closer. And when you fail, everyone will know exactly what happens when a janitor's son mistakes curiosity for competence. Arthur's face hardened. Eli stood still. Marianne whispered, Baby, no. Eli looked at her. In his eyes, she saw the little boy who once fixed their old Honda with library books and a toothbrush. She also saw something new, a line he would not step back from. I can do it, Mom, he said. Grant smiled. Arthur studied the boy. And somewhere deep inside the wounded Ferrari, the engine stumbled again. Soft, brief, almost hidden. But this time, more than one person heard it. The week before the hearing did not feel like 7 days. It felt like one long breath Eli could not release. By Monday morning, the story had already moved beyond Titan Prestige Motors. It started as a whisper in the vintage car world. By lunch, it was in private forums. By dinner, a local automotive blog had a headline that made Marianne's stomach turn. 13-year-old claims he can fix $70 million Ferrari. They did not write his name with respect. They wrote it like a punchline. At school, Eli felt the difference before first period. 2 boys near the lockers stared at him, then looked at their phones and laughed. A girl from his science class walked past and whispered, Ferrari kid. Eli kept moving. He had learned long ago that silence could be armor, but armor was heavy. By lunch, he sat alone outside near the basketball courts with a peanut butter sandwich wrapped in foil. His notebook lay open on his knees. Not homework, fuel pressure diagrams, heat expansion notes, rubber degradation patterns. Things no 7th grader should have been thinking about while other kids traded chips and talked about weekend games. His pencil moved fast, then stopped. A shadow fell over the page. You really doing this? Eli looked up. It was Marcus Reed, a quiet boy from his math class. Marcus rarely spoke to anyone unless he had a reason. Eli shrugged. Looks like it. Marcus glanced at the notebook, then back at Eli. My uncle works at a dealership. He said those guys are going to try to bury you. Eli looked down. I know. Marcus stood there a second longer. His backpack hung from one shoulder. His face carried the awkward kindness of a kid who wanted to help and did not know how. Then he said, Don't let them. Eli looked up again. Marcus nodded once and walked away. It was not much, but it was something. Across town, Marianne was losing sleep in daylight. She cleaned offices with a vacuum cord looped over one arm, but her mind stayed in that surface bay. Grant's threat played over and over. You will never work in this city again. She had bills stacked in a drawer at home, rent due, car insurance late. A dentist appointment she kept canceling because teeth could wait and electricity could not. At 4:15 that afternoon, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost ignored it. Then she answered. Mrs. Carter, a calm voice said, "This is Arthur Langford." Marianne stopped beside a row of cubicles. The vacuum hummed behind her. "Yes, sir? I wanted you to know something. Whatever happens next week, your job will not be held hostage because your son told the truth." Her throat tightened. "Mr. Langford, with respect, you do not control Mr. Whitaker." "No," Arthur said, "but I control where I spend my money, and men like Grant Whitaker understand that language very well." Marianne closed her eyes. For one moment, she let herself breathe. "Thank you," she whispered. Arthur was quiet for a beat. "Your son is brave." Marianne looked toward the dark window, where her own reflection stared back at her. Tired eyes, work shirt, hands rough from cleaning chemicals. "He should not have to be," she said. Arthur had no answer for that, because she was right. That evening, Eli walked 3 blocks to Frank Bellini's garage. The old building sat behind a narrow house in Oakland, half hidden by jasmine vines and a chain-link fence. The paint was peeling. The roof sagged at one corner. But inside, it was a different world. Ferrari posters covered the walls. Old carburetors sat on metal shelves. A workbench held calipers, gauges, hand tools, and coffee cups stained with years of use. Frank Bellini was under the hood of an old Alfa Romeo when Eli came in. "You are late," Frank said without looking up. School is always blaming itself." Eli almost smiled, almost. Frank straightened slowly, one hand pressed to his lower back. He was 75, thin but strong in the wrists, with white hair and eyes that missed nothing. He looked at Eli's face. The humor left him. "They got to you." Eli dropped his backpack onto a stool. "I am fine." Frank wiped his hands on a rag. "Fine is what people say when they are carrying something alone." Eli stared at the concrete floor. Then the words came out. "What if I am wrong?" The garage seemed to quiet around him. Outside, a truck passed. Somewhere, a dog barked. Inside, Frank set the rag down like it mattered. "Then you learn," he said. Eli looked up, startled. Frank stepped closer. "You think the shame is being wrong?" "No. The shame is pretending you know when you do not. The shame is letting pride speak louder than evidence." Eli swallowed. "They want me to fail." "Yes, they want everyone to see it." "Yes," Frank's face hardened. "So make them see the truth instead." He reached under the bench and pulled out a small metal case. Worn, black, scratched at the corners. He opened it. Inside lay an old analog fuel pressure gauge, polished clean with a cracked leather strap. Eli stared at it. Frank's voice softened. "This was mine at Maranello. Before computers did the listening for lazy men." Eli touched the case but not the gauge. "I cannot take that, you can." Frank closed the lid gently. "And you will." Eli looked at him. For the first time all week, his breathing steadied. Frank nodded toward the Alpha. "Now we practice. Heat cycle, pressure drop, again and again until your hands know before your fear does." Eli picked up the gauge. Outside, the sun went down over Oakland. Inside the garage, under yellow light and the smell of oil, a boy the world had already dismissed began preparing to prove that truth does not need permission to be true. The morning of the diagnostic session arrived, cold and gray. A marine layer hung over San Francisco, turning the glass buildings pale and the streets silver. Eli sat in the passenger seat of his mother's old Honda, the black metal gauge case resting on his lap. He held it with both hands, like it might disappear if he loosened his grip. Marianne drove without turning on the radio. Her eyes stayed on the road, but every few seconds she looked at him. "You slept?" she asked. "A little. That means no." Eli looked out the window. The city moved past in pieces, coffee shops opening, delivery trucks backing into alleys, men in suits checking phones at crosswalks, people starting ordinary days, unaware that one boy was riding toward a room built to prove he did not belong. Marianne pulled up to a red light. "Eli." He turned. Her face was tired, not just from one bad week. from years of choosing which bill could wait, from swallowing words at work, because survival sometimes wore the shape of silence. "I need you to listen to me," she said. "No matter what happens in there, you are not what they call you. You understand?" Eli nodded. She reached over and fixed the collar of his white shirt. Her fingers lingered there. "You are not their jokes. You are not their fear. You are not their smallness." His throat tightened. "Yes, Mom." The light changed. She drove on. Titan Prestige Motors looked different that morning. Too clean. Too prepared. News vans were parked along the curb. 2 men with cameras stood near the service entrance. A security guard checked names at the door. Inside, the service bay had been rearranged like a courtroom. The Ferrari sat under the brightest lights. Red, perfect. Waiting. A folding table had been set up near the lift. 3 independent observers sat there with clipboards. Victor Hayes, gray-haired and narrow-eyed, represented the Classics Automotive Certification Board. Beside him sat a technical liaison from Ferrari North America. The third was an insurance specialist hired by Arthur's office. Grant Whitaker stood near them in a charcoal suit, not a shop coat. That said everything. He was not there to fix a car. He was there to control a story. When Eli and Marianne entered, every head turned. The sound lowered, not stopped. Lowered. Whispers moved around the room like cold air. Grant smiled as if greeting guests at a country club. "Good morning, Eli," he said. "I trust you are prepared." Eli held the gauge case tighter. "Yes, sir." Grant's eyes dropped to the case. Charming. Vintage props. Owen Mitchell stood near the tool chest, arms folded. He looked at Eli, then looked away. Shame had made a home somewhere behind his eyes, but it had not yet taught him courage. Arthur Langford arrived last. No entourage, no dramatic entrance. Just a dark overcoat, steady steps, and a face that had not slept much either. He walked straight to Marianne. "First, Mrs. Carter." She blinked, surprised. "Mr. Langford, thank you for coming." Grant's smile stiffened. The cameras caught that. Arthur then looked at Eli. "Morning, son." Eli nodded. "Morning, sir." Victor Hayes cleared his throat. "We will begin at 9 o'clock. The participant will have 90 minutes to inspect, test, and present a preliminary diagnosis. No permanent modification without owner approval. No hazardous procedure. All tools must be declared before use." Grant spread his hands. "Of course. We want everything proper." Arthur glanced at him. For once, no one laughed. The clock on the wall clicked to 9. Victor looked at Eli. "You may begin." For 1 second, Eli did not move. The room felt huge. The lights felt hot. He could hear a camera lens focusing. Hear someone's pen scratch paper. Hear his mother breathing behind him. Then he remembered Frank's garage. Yellow light. Oil smell. The old man's voice. "Let the machine speak first." Eli walked to the Ferrari, not fast, not slow. He set the case on a rolling cart and opened it. The analog gauge sat inside, old but clean, its glass face catching the light. Grant shook his head. "We have factory-grade digital equipment available." Eli did not look at him. "I know. Then why use that?" Eli connected the hose carefully. "Because I am not looking for the average." He tightened the fitting by hand. "I am looking for the moment." The room went still. Owen looked up. Victor wrote something down. Eli stepped back. "Start the engine, please." A technician looked at Grant. Grant nodded with irritation. The key turned, the Ferrari woke, the sound filled the bay, rich, deep, almost proud. Eli watched the needle. At first it barely moved. Steady. Clean. Grant smiled. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. The room grew restless. Grant checked his watch where everyone could see. "Perhaps the moment is shy," he said. A few people chuckled. Eli kept watching. 20 minutes. The engine warmed. Heat shimmered faintly over the manifold. The needle held, then dipped. Just a breath. Eli's eyes sharpened. There. No one spoke. The needle recovered. Grant stepped forward. That was nothing. Eli pointed without touching the gauge. "It will happen again." And this time the whole room watched. The engine ran. The air tightened. 5 seconds. 10. Then the needle fell again. Small, clear, real. The Ferrari stumbled. Arthur's hand closed over the back of a chair. Victor Hayes leaned forward. Owen whispered, "I'll be damned." Grant's face lost color. Eli Carter stood beside the car they said he could never understand. And the machine had just spoken for him. Grant Whitaker moved before anyone could speak. He crossed to the rolling cart and looked down at the gauge, as if staring harder might change what it showed. The needle had returned to normal, calm, and steady, like nothing had happened. "That is not conclusive," he said. His voice was still smooth but thinner now. Victor Hayes did not look up from his clipboard. "Two pressure drops matched by two audible stumbles," Victor said. "That is relevant." Grant's eyes flicked toward him. "Relevant, yes. Diagnostic, no. This could be vapor lock. It could be regulator fatigue. It could be contamination in the bowl." Eli nodded once. "It could." Grant paused. He had expected argument. Eli did not give him one. The boy reached for a small flashlight from the cart and leaned over the engine bay. He did not touch anything yet. He just looked. His eyes followed the fuel delivery path, fitting to fitting, hose to clamp, clamp to bend. Owen Mitchell stepped closer without realizing it. Eli pointed to a section of fuel line tucked near the exhaust manifold. There, Grant laughed under his breath. "A fuel hose?" "Yes, sir. That hose has passed visual inspection 3 times. It's outside." "Yes." Grant's face hardened. "What does that mean?" Eli turned the flashlight slightly. The beam cut across the old rubber, dull black, and clean enough to fool a careful eye. "It means the outside can look fine while the inside is failing." The Ferrari idled behind his words. Heat rose. The bay smelled of warm oil, fuel, rubber, and polished concrete. Eli continued, slower now, careful not to sound proud. "Old rubber can separate inside. Heat makes it worse. When this part warms up, the inner wall can soften or collapse just enough to restrict flow. Not always. Just for a few seconds. Then it opens again." Victor leaned forward. "How would you verify that without cutting the original hose?" Eli looked at Arthur. "With permission, I would install a temporary bypass line around this section. Nothing permanent. Reversible. Then we run the same heat cycle." Arthur answered before Grant could. "You have permission." Grant's head snapped toward him. "Mr. Langford, I strongly advise against allowing a miner to alter the fuel system on a vehicle of this value." Arthur did not blink. "He will not be alone." He turned to Owen. "Mr. Mitchell, can you supervise for safety?" Owen's mouth opened, then closed. Grant stared at him. The whole room stared at him. This was the line. Owen could feel it under his shoes. For years, he had worked under Grant. He had laughed and Grant laughed. Stayed quiet when Grant cut people down. Told himself he was just a mechanic, not a judge. But the lie felt heavier now. A child had done the work. A child had taken the risk. And Owen was still hiding behind a paycheck. He looked at Eli, then at Marianne, then at Grant. "Yes," Owen said. Grant's eyes narrowed. Owen swallowed, but did not take it back. "I can supervise." A quiet shock moved through the room. Eli opened his tool roll. His hands moved with care, not quick, not showy. He placed each tool where he could reach it. Line wrench, clamp pliers, clean rags, temporary hose. A small catch pan. Owen knelt beside him. "Fuel pump off first," Owen said. Eli nodded. "Yes, sir." Together they worked. Grant stood back with his arms crossed, his face tight enough to crack. Marianne watched every move. Her lips moved silently. Maybe prayer, maybe fear, maybe both. Arthur stood behind her. He said nothing, but he stayed close enough that she knew she was not alone in that room. The old hose section came free with a soft twist. Eli held it in his gloved hand. It looked ordinary. That was the cruel thing. So much damage in the world looked ordinary until someone cared enough to look deeper. He set it gently on a clean cloth, then helped Owen install the temporary bypass. Every fitting was checked twice, then a third time. Victor inspected the work. The Ferrari liaison nodded. "Safe to run," he said. Grant looked away. The engine started again. The room tightened. The gauge needle rose. Steady. 10 minutes. 15. 20. The heat came back. The same conditions. The same sound. The same car. But this time, the needle did not fall. The engine did not stumble. It ran clean, smooth, strong. Arthur's breathing changed first. A small sound left him. Not a sob. Not yet. More like a man who had been underwater too long and had just found air. Eli watched the gauge for another full minute. Then he looked at Victor. No drop. Victor nodded slowly. No drop. Owen stared at the engine like it had just confessed in open court. Grant stepped forward. One successful cycle does not establish final causation. Eli turned to him. Then we put the old line back. The words hit the room hard. Grant froze. Arthur looked at Eli. The boy's face was calm, not arrogant, not angry. Certain, if the drop returns, Eli said, we know. No one spoke, even the cameras seemed quieter. Grant's mouth tightened. He wanted to refuse. Everyone could see it, but refusal would look worse than failure. So he nodded once. Fine. The old hose went back on, the engine restarted. 5 minutes passed. 8, 12. Then the needle dipped. The Ferrari stumbled. Harder this time. Arthur closed his eyes. Victor wrote one line on his clipboard. Owen whispered, it was the hose. Eli stood beside the car, small under the service lights, his gloves marked with fuel and dust. Grant Whitaker had spent 18 months selling certainty. Eli Carter had brought proof. Arthur Langford did not ask anyone for permission. He walked toward the driver's side of the Ferrari, slow and steady, as if the whole room had faded behind him. The technicians parted without a word. Grant opened his mouth, then thought better of it. Arthur placed one hand on the roof. For a second, he just stood there. The red paint reflected his face in a broken curve. An old man, a tired man, a man who had spent 18 months trying to buy back a sound. Victor Hayes stepped forward. Mr. Langford, before any road test, we should complete the written I am driving my car, Arthur said. Victor stopped. Not offended, just reminded. Owen moved quickly to reinstall the temporary bypass line under Eli's direction. This time, no one laughed. No one made a joke about the gauge. No one called him boy. Eli checked the clamp. Owen checked it after him. Their hands moved in the same space now, different ages, different histories, one truth between them. Owen looked at Eli and spoke low. Good catch. Eli glanced at him. Thank you, sir. Owen's face tightened at the word sir. It should have felt respectful. Instead, it felt like a mirror. Mary Ann stood near the wall, both hands pressed to her chest. She had imagined many dangers for her son. Police stops, bad teachers, men with power and no kindness. She had never imagined him standing under white lights, while millionaires and mechanics waited for his next instruction. Pride scared her. That was the thing no one told you. Sometimes pride felt too close to fear. Arthur opened the driver's door. The leather creaked softly. He paused before sitting down. Eli, he said. The boy looked up. Would you ride with me? Grant stepped forward fast. Absolutely not. That is a liability issue. He is a minor. Arthur looked at Mary Ann. Not Grant. Mrs. Carter. The room turned with him. Mary Ann felt the weight of every eye. Her instinct said no. Her fear said no. But Eli looked at her with that same quiet certainty he had carried since he was 8 years old, standing over their broken Honda with grease on his fingers and hope in his mouth. She breathed in, then nodded once. Seatbelt, she said. A small sound moved through the room. Not laughter. Something warmer, human. Eli climbed into the passenger seat. The door closed. The cabin smelled like old leather, fuel, and time. Eli sat very still, the way children sit in places they have only dreamed about. His hands rested on his knees. His shoes did not touch anything they did not need to touch. Arthur started the engine. The V12 came alive. This time it sounded different. Not louder. Freer. Arthur guided the Ferrari out of the service bay and into the gray morning. A black SUV from Arthur's security team followed at a distance. Victor and the Ferrari liaison rode behind with monitoring equipment. Grant stood in the doorway, jaw locked, watching the car leave without him. The streets near the waterfront were damp. The tires hissed softly over the pavement. Arthur drove gently at first. Low speed, light throttle, listening. Eli listened too. The engine held steady. Arthur turned onto a longer road, one he had chosen because it had exposed the failure twice before. A gradual incline. A clean stretch. Enough load to make the old problem appear. His hand tightened on the shifter. My son hated this hill, Arthur said. Eli turned his head slightly. Arthur kept his eyes on the road. Caleb would stall right there at the light, every time. Then he would laugh like the car had told him a joke. The light ahead turned green. Arthur shifted. The Ferrari climbed. No stumble. No hesitation. Just power. Smooth and alive. Arthur's mouth opened, but no words came. He pressed the throttle a little more. The engine answered. Clean. Strong. The sound filled the cabin like sunlight after a long winter. Arthur blinked hard. For a moment, the road was not the road. It was California years ago. His father beside him. Caleb laughing in the passenger seat. 3 generations held inside one machine, not because metal could bring back the dead, but because memory sometimes needed a voice. And that voice had returned. Arthur pulled into a quiet overlook near the bay. He stopped the car but left the engine running. He sat there, both hands on the wheel. Eli did not speak. He knew some moments were not empty. They were full. Arthur lowered his head. His shoulders moved once, then again. The billionaire, who had stood in rooms with senators and defense contractors and judges, now cried quietly beside a 13-year-old boy in a repaired Ferrari. After a long minute, Arthur wiped his face with the heel of his hand. "My father used to say she would tell you before she broke." Eli looked at the dashboard. "Mr. Bellini says the same thing." Arthur nodded slowly. "Then Mr. Bellini is a wise man." The engine idled beneath them, steady, patient. Arthur turned to Eli. "You gave me something today that money could not buy." Eli shook his head. "I just found the bad hose." "No," Arthur said. His voice was low but firm. "You listened when everyone else was busy being important." Eli looked down. Those words stayed with him, not because they were praise, because they were justice. When they returned to Titan Prestige Motors, everyone was waiting. The Ferrari rolled into the bay without a stumble, without a cough, without shame. Arthur stepped out first. His eyes were red, his back was straight. He looked at Victor Hayes. "Document it." Then he turned to the room. "My car is fixed." No one moved. Arthur looked at Eli. "By him." For 3 seconds, no one in the service bay spoke. Arthur Langford's words hung in the air. "By him." The cameras turned toward Eli. The technicians turned toward Eli. Even the men who had laughed a week earlier now stood with their hands in their pockets, faces blank, unsure what to do with the truth when it came from someone they had decided not to see. Eli stood beside his mother, small, quiet, still holding Frank Bellini's old gauge case. Marianne covered her mouth with one hand. Her eyes were wet, but she did not cry. Not yet. She had spent too many years holding herself together in rooms where breaking down would cost too much. Grant Whitaker forced a smile. "Well," he said, stepping forward, "let us be careful with language here." The boy made a useful observation. "Under supervision, inside my facility, with my team providing technical support." Arthur looked at him. The smile died slowly. Victor Hayes removed his glasses and set them on the table. "Mr. Whitaker," he said, "the record will show that Eli Carter identified the fault, proposed the test, performed the diagnostic sequence, and verified the result." Grant's eyes sharpened. "He is not licensed." "No," Victor said, "but he was correct." That was the sentence Grant could not survive. Not because it was loud, because it was clean. A reporter near the bay door lifted her microphone. "Mr. Carter," she called, then caught herself. "Eli, how did you know where to look?" Eli's shoulders tightened. He looked at his mother first. Marianne nodded once. "Not permission to perform, permission to stand." Eli faced the cameras. "I heard the stumble after heat soak," he said. "It sounded like a fuel pressure issue, but not constant. Mr. Bellini taught me that old rubber can fail inside before it shows outside." The reporter leaned in. "And Mr. Bellini is?" A voice came from the back of the bay, an old man who told him to keep his ears open. Everyone turned. Frank Bellini stood just inside the service entrance, wearing a brown jacket, a flat cap, and work boots polished by years of garage floors. He had not wanted attention. Men like Frank did not come to be applauded. They came to make sure a student was not left alone. Eli's face changed. For the first time all morning, he looked like a child. "Mr. Bellini." Frank gave him a small nod. "You did not embarrass the gauge." A few people smiled. Not many, enough. Arthur stepped toward Frank and extended his hand. "Arthur Langford." Frank looked at the hand, then at Arthur's face. He saw no performance there, only gratitude. They shook. "You taught him well," Arthur said. Frank glanced at Eli. He did the hard part. He listened. Grant could feel the room slipping farther away. His own employees were looking at Frank now with recognition. Some had heard the name Bellini, Maranello, old Ferrari factory stories. A man who had tuned engines before many of them were born. Grant cleared his throat. "This is touching, but we need to return to procedure. Mr. Langford, my office can prepare a final repair estimate and no," Arthur said. Grant froze. Arthur turned fully toward him. You will prepare nothing. The room sharpened. Grant's mouth opened. Arthur continued. I want every invoice your facility has issued on this car. Every work order. Every replaced part. Every diagnostic note. I want copies delivered to my attorney by 5 o'clock. Grant's face drained. Mr. Langford, that is unnecessary. It became necessary when a 13-year-old found what your specialist missed after billing me for months. Grant's voice dropped. Be careful. Accusations like that carry weight. Arthur stepped closer, so did invoices. A silence followed, heavy, moral. The kind that made people review their own choices in real time. Near the back wall, Anthony Brooks, the security guard, watched with his arms at his sides. He had worked at Titan for 6 years. He had seen resumes disappear, heard jokes in offices, watched skilled applicants get told positions were filled, only to see less qualified men hired the next week. His jaw clenched. He looked at Eli, then at Marianne. Something settled in him. A decision. Grant tried one last turn. Arthur, we have known each other a long time. No, Arthur said. You have billed me a long time. That is not the same thing. Owen Mitchell looked down. That one cut him too. Arthur walked back to Eli and lowered himself slightly, not quite kneeling, but enough to meet the boy's eyes. What do you want to do with cars, Eli? Eli blinked. No one had ever asked it like that. Not what trouble are you causing? Not who do you think you are? What do you want? I want to restore them, Eli said. Old ones. The right way. Arthur nodded. Then we start there. Marianne stared at him. Mr. Langford, we cannot accept you have not heard the offer yet. His voice softened. This is not charity. Charity is easy. Investment is harder. I am investing in a mine that this room almost threw away. Eli looked down at the gauge case. Frank's eyes glistened, but he hid it by clearing his throat. Arthur turned back to the cameras. Let the record show something else today. Talent does not always walk through the front door wearing a title. Sometimes it comes in with the cleaning crew. Sometimes it is holding a broom. Then he looked at Grant. And sometimes the people in charge are the last ones qualified to judge it. By 5 o'clock that afternoon, Grant Whitaker had stopped smiling. He sat alone in his glass office while the service bay outside moved around him in strange silence. Phones rang. Tools clinked. A compressor kicked on and off near the far wall. Ordinary sounds, but nothing felt ordinary now. On his desk sat a formal request from Arthur Langford's attorney. Every invoice, every work order, every part record, every technician note. Grant read the letter 3 times, then folded it once with both hands. His fingers were stiff. His face was pale in the reflection of the window. Outside the office, Anthony Brooks stood near the security station and watched Grant through the glass. Anthony had seen that look before. Power discovering paperwork. He waited until Grant left for the conference room. Then Anthony opened the bottom drawer of his desk and pulled out a brown envelope he had kept hidden beneath old shift logs. He did not do it fast. He did it carefully. Inside were copies of emails, printed schedules, names, dates, notes he had written after hearing things he was never supposed to hear. Candidate rejected. Strong resume. No interview. Position filled. Applicant never contacted. Grant said not a client-facing fit. Anthony stared at the envelope for a long time. 6 years at Titan had taught him one ugly lesson. Bad men rarely fell because people did not know. They fell when someone finally decided knowing was not enough. He picked up his phone and called the number printed at the bottom of Arthur's attorney letter. Across town, Marianne Carter sat at her kitchen table, with her shoes still on. She had not moved since coming home. The little apartment smelled like reheated soup and laundry soap. Eli's school backpack was by the door. Frank's gauge case sat in the center of the table, like it belonged in a museum. Eli stood at the sink, washing his hands for the 3rd time. There was still a thin, dark line of grease under one fingernail. Marianne watched him. All day, people had called her son gifted, brilliant, special. But she remembered him at 3 years old, sleeping with a plastic truck under his arm. She remembered fevers, cheap birthday cakes, shoes bought one size too big so they would last. She remembered telling him to be quiet in rooms where he should have been safe to speak. That memory hurt more than she expected. Eli, she said. He turned off the water. Yes, Mom? She tried to speak, but the words tangled, so she stood and crossed the kitchen. She took his wet hands in hers and held them between them. "I am sorry," she said. Eli frowned. "For what? For teaching you to make yourself small?" His face changed, not quickly, slowly, like a door opening in a dark room. "Mama, you were protecting me." "I know." Her voice broke. "But protection should not have to look like silence." Eli looked down at their hands. He did not know what to say, so he leaned into her. She wrapped both arms around him. "This time," she cried. Not because she was weak, because the danger had passed just long enough for her body to remember it had been afraid. The next morning the story was everywhere. Not national news, not yet, but enough. Local stations ran footage of Eli beside the Ferrari. Automotive sites replayed Arthur's statement. Comment sections filled with the usual noise. Some people praised the boy, some mocked the story. Some argued about race, class, privilege, and whether a child should ever have needed a billionaire's approval to be heard. Arthur read the headlines in his study before sunrise. Then he closed the laptop. Headlines were cheap, action was not. At 9:30, he met with his attorney, his foundation director, and a retired vocational education dean named Dr. Helen Price. "I do not want a photo opportunity," Arthur said. "I want a path." Dr. Price adjusted her glasses. "For Eli?" "For Eli first," Arthur said. "Then for others like him." The attorney leaned back. "There are liability concerns, age, equipment, shop access. Then solve them." Arthur's tone was calm, not negotiable. Dr. Price nodded slowly. "A supervised scholarship track, STEM tutoring, paid summer placement when he is old enough, mentorship through certified restoration shops. We could build it cleanly." Arthur looked at her. "Build it." That afternoon, Owen Mitchell drove to Frank Bellini's garage and sat outside for nearly 10 minutes before getting out. Frank was sanding a carburetor housing near the open door. He did not look up. "If you are here to apologize to the boy, he is at school." Owen removed his cap. "I know." Frank kept sanding. Owen swallowed. "I am here because I laughed." The sanding stopped. Owen looked at the floor. "I did not say the worst things. That is what I told myself. But I laughed. I stood there. I let it happen." Frank's eyes lifted. "And now?" Owen breathed in. "Now I want to learn how not to be that kind of man." Frank studied him for a long moment. Then he pointed to a stool. "Sit." Owen sat. Not as the lead technician. Not as an expert. As a man beginning again. And in the quiet garage, with dust floating through a blade of afternoon light, the real repair work started. 1 year later, the old garage in Oakland had a new sign over the door. Eli Carter School of Automotive Arts. The paint was fresh. The windows were clean. The roof no longer sagged in the corner. Inside, the shelves still held old carburetors, brass fittings, cracked manuals, and parts that looked useless to anyone who did not know how to listen. But now there were workbenches for students. Safety posters on the walls. A small classroom in the back with donated laptops and a coffee maker that never seemed to rest. Frank Bellini stood near the doorway with his arms folded. He pretended the dust in the air bothered his eyes. It did not. Eli Carter, now 14, stood at the front of the room wearing a dark blue shop apron that was still too large for him. 8 students sat at the benches. Some were teenagers. Some were grown adults changing careers. One was a retired postal worker with hearing aids and hands steady enough to rebuild a watch. Owen Mitchell sat in the back row, not teaching, learning. Mary Ann stood near the office door with a clipboard against her chest. Arthur Langford had offered her a job managing the school's scholarship office. She had said she did not know how to do work like that. Arthur told her she had been managing impossible things her whole life. She took the job. Now she watched her son look over the room. No broom in his hands, no man standing over him, no laughter waiting to cut him down. Just tools, students, light, a future. Eli placed Frank's old analog gauge on the bench in front of him. "This is not fancy," he said. His voice was still quiet, but nobody leaned back. Nobody checked a phone. Nobody acted like quiet meant weak. "This gauge does one thing. It tells the truth in real time." He looked around the room. "Machines are like people in one way. If you only notice them when they break, you missed everything they tried to tell you before that." Frank lowered his eyes. Arthur, standing near the open bay door, felt those words settle into him. The Ferrari sat outside in the morning sun, red paint glowing beneath the California sky. It was not there as a trophy. Arthur had driven it himself, slowly, carefully, with the window down. For the first time in years, he had not been afraid of the sound. After class, a small ceremony gathered in the garage yard. No red carpet, no staged speeches. Just folding chairs, coffee in paper cups, neighbors, former clients, students, and a few reporters who had learned that the real story had not ended at Titan Prestige Motors. Anthony Brooks arrived in a gray suit that still had the store tag tucked inside one sleeve. Marianne noticed and fixed it for him without saying a word. His documents had helped open a state labor investigation. Titan's hiring records were reviewed. Several former applicants were contacted. Grant Whitaker resigned before the board could remove him. The settlement was quiet, but not small. New hiring oversight followed. Back pay was issued to 2 employees. 3 apprenticeships were created for students from underfunded schools. It did not fix everything. Justice rarely does, but it made the lie more expensive, and sometimes that is where change starts. Arthur stepped to the front. He did not hold notes. "I thought I was saving a car," he said. "That is what I told myself. I thought this was about metal, fuel, timing, and memory." He looked at Eli. "I was wrong." The yard grew still. This was about who gets heard, who gets dismissed, who is allowed to be brilliant before someone with a title gives them permission. Grant's name was never spoken. It did not need to be. Arthur continued. "We talk a lot in this country about opportunity. But opportunity is not real if a child has to survive humiliation before anyone will recognize his gift." Marianne blinked hard. Eli looked down at his shoes. Arthur's voice softened. "So this school will not be charity. It will be a door, a real one, with tools behind it, teachers behind it, standards behind it, and respect at the center of it." The applause started small, then grew. Not wild steady, earned. Frank stepped close to Eli and placed one weathered hand on his shoulder. "You hear that?" he asked. Eli nodded. Frank smiled. "Good. Now forget the applause. Remember the work." Eli smiled too, a real smile this time. Across the yard, Owen wiped his eyes quickly and pretended to check his phone. Anthony saw it and said nothing. Some repairs were private. Later, when the crowd thinned, Eli walked over to the Ferrari. Arthur stood beside it. "Want to start her?" Arthur asked. Eli looked surprised. "Me?" Arthur handed him the key. "You earned the sound." Eli slid into the driver's seat. His hands touched the wheel with care. The key turned. The engine woke, clean, deep, alive. Marianne closed her eyes. Frank listened. Arthur looked toward the sky, and for one gentle second, his father and his son felt close again. Eli did not become powerful because he fixed a Ferrari. He had been powerful before anyone believed him. His power was patience, discipline, truth, the courage to speak when silence would have been safer. And that is the lesson. Never measure a person by the job they hold, the clothes they wear, the neighborhood they come from, or the way the world has treated them. Some of the brightest minds are standing quietly in the corner, waiting for someone decent enough to listen. If this story moved you, like this video so more people can hear it. Subscribe for more stories about courage, justice, and human dignity. And in the comments, write these 3 words: never stay silent.